Hola, Eileen,
Hola,
¿cómo estás?
¿está bien? ¿Y tú?
Muy bien, gracias. Eileen, ¿recibiste un correo con la información o entraste por el WhatsApp?
Um, I can do WhatsApp,
Oh, did you enter because of the WhatsApp group or because of the email?
the email.
Ah, ok, listo. Muy bien. Bueno, vamos a empezar. ¿Listo? Vamos a hacer entonces el taller sobre conjugaciones en español. Voy a, voy a hablar en inglés y en español, ¿listo? Porque es un taller básico. Bueno, Eileen, entonces, vamos a empezar por aquí. Ok. Entonces, tu nivel de español, ¿cómo crees que está? ¿Básico, intermedio o avanzado?
Um, Creo básico. Well, en básico y media.
Mm, sí, eso te iba a decir, como básico alto, ¿sí?
Básico.
Muy bien, listo. Bueno, entonces, hoy vamos a entender por qué los verbos y las conjugaciones son importantes. Vamos a aprender los puntos clave de conjugación y vamos a mejorar la habilidad de comunicación con las conjugaciones en español en tiempo presente. ¿Listo? Bueno, entonces, esta es nuestra tabla de contenidos para el día de hoy. Vamos a hablar de una introducción, por qué conjugamos en español, qué factores influencian la conjugación. Vamos a hablar del tiempo presente, la persona gramatical, las partes del verbo, verbos regulares, verbos de cambio vocálico y verbos irregulares en primera persona. ¿Listo? Entonces, para empezar, em, es muy importante estar presentes aquí porque si nos distraemos, es posible que ya no volvamos a estar en track, como decimos. Hola, Wendy. Wendy, ¿me escuchas? Can you hear me, Wendy? Bueno, no sé, pero ahí está Wendy. Listo. Entonces, súper importante. Respect the time here. Silence your phone. Try to avoid distractions. Close social media and let other people know that you'll be busy. And take notes. También, súper importante. Tomar notas y preguntar. Ask questions as well. Entonces, tres maneras de pasar el tiempo. Three ways to spend this time. You can either judge, criticize, and search for the smallest mistake. You can also think that the class is great, a lot of information, but then at the end you don't apply the information or the things that you learned. And you can also empty your cup of water, open your mind, and learn. Ask questions, try to use what you learned today in future conversations or anytime you need to use Spanish in order to communicate. Bueno, who am I? Mi nombre es Laura. My name is Laura, and I am the founder of Smart Spanish. We are a project that combines learning the Spanish language with cultural trips to Colombia. This project was born out of my love for my country. I am so very proud of being Colombian, and I want to show that to everyone, and I would love for everyone to come visit. And that's what I do. Eso es lo que yo hago. So what services do we offer here? We do short immersion trips to Colombia. We have different destinations such as Quindío, Bogotá, Medellín, Barranquilla. Rincón del Mar y Cartagena, Cali, etc. We also do online lessons. We do private lessons, group classes, and conversation clubs. And right now we're working on our pre-recorded courses and a book, a conjugation book, actually, un libro de conjugaciones. Ahora, este tema es importante. I have a lot of experience with teaching and interacting with people who are learning Spanish. And I've noticed, like, when I speak to someone who's learning, I can tell what they need to learn. Or maybe something they're lacking or they need to practice more. Sometimes I speak with intermediate or advanced students, and I notice that we need to correct things. And it's harder to correct when you've already been doing the same mistake for months or years. So that's why this is very basic, but it's really important. If your base is strong, your foundation is strong, you can move on quicker and you can learn faster as you move on. ¿Listo? Bien. Entonces, aquí. So if you have issues with lack of confidence when speaking, you don't understand the concept of conjugation, which can be possible. Some languages don't conjugate verbs. So it's normal if you don't understand something that is new to you. If you feel like you speak like a child or a small kid, or if you feel like conjugation is not necessary, then this workshop is for you. Some students think that they don't need to conjugate because they can still make people understand what they want to say, but it is very strange to talk to someone who doesn't conjugate in Spanish. You sound like a robot. So it's very important if you want to sound more natural. Es muy importante la conjugación. Ahora, many people learn by themselves, which is really good. I also do that. But we sometimes come to a point in which we feel stuck. We feel like it's hard to understand. Maybe we have read books, we have seen videos, we have even taken lessons, but when we want to talk, we freeze or we don't understand. So sometimes it's good to ask for help from a teacher, someone who can guide you through what you need in order to reach your goals. ¿Listo? Entonces, vamos a empezar. So let's start. First, why do we conjugate in Spanish? ¿Qué crees, Aileen? Why do you think we conjugate?
So whoever you're talking to knows that you're talking about either them or somebody else.
Muy bien, muy bien, muy bien. Sí. Do you know what a conjugation is? What do we call a conjugation?
I guess like a way of describing the word or giving it a noun to go with or
It's a form of the verb. Mm-hmm.
Is it to make it so that the verb is set up for the right people, number of people in the right situation?
Yes. Yes. So a conjugation gives us a lot of information. I'll show you this verb. Let me get to it. So here, let's take a look at this verb, the verb hablar. Hablar is in the base form. The base form in Spanish ends in ar, ir. So this verb ends in ar, in the base form, infinitivo. But we have so many different forms here. Hablamos, hablé, hablabais, hablo, hablarán, habló, hablado, hablaría. We conjugate a lot in Spanish, a lot. In English, it's much easier to conjugate. Sometimes I have many students that speak English as their native language, and they don't know what a conjugation is because you don't really conjugate that much. The verb that I see that it changes more is to be. Because in English, you don't say I be, you say I am. But I am is a form of the verb to be. It's just that is according to the person I in present tense. So it's kind of similar in Spanish, but we do that. We change the form of the verb according to every person, every tense, and the verbal mood as well. So the conjugation will tell us who is performing the action and when and other details as well. Entonces, Aileen and Wendy, do you know all of these forms for hablar? Are you familiar with them?
No.
Okay. I guess you might be familiar with this one, hablo. Sí. Or maybe hablamos as well. So let me show
Yes.
you. So here we can see the subject for each form, the tense, if it's past, future, present, and sometimes the verbal mood as well. So we get a lot of information according to the form of the verb. You don't have to learn all of this in one lesson. It's almost impossible, but we can go step by step. So today we will be working on the present tense. Hablo is present tense, and hablamos as well, present tense. Now, conjugation is very important because it helps us understand who we are talking about and when the action has or is being performed. Now, things that influence conjugation in Spanish. So to understand conjugations, we need to understand the base form of a verb. So as I told you before, the base form of a verb is called infinitive. In Spanish, infinitives ends in either ar, ir. This is very important because that's how we divide the groups, conjugation groups. Verbs that end in ar, verbs that end in and verbs that end in ir. So we need to understand that. That's very important. Now, the tense also matters because it's not the same to talk in present, past, or future. Let's look at the verb comer. Comer is to eat. The first person, yo. If I want to talk about the past, I will say comí, yo comí. If I want to talk about the present, then I say yo como. And in the future, I will say yo comeré. Entonces, comí, como, comeré. Is the same person, yo, but in different tenses. And the verb changes. Bien? Do you have any questions so far? Okay, vamos. Now, the person and number, also very important. We change the endings of the verbs according to the person. I'll get to this later in a bit. And also the number, if the person is only one or if it is a group. We also change according to this. Por ejemplo, let's look at the verb vivir. So what we're doing right now is just looking at how the verb changes according to the person. So when we have the person yo, I, we have the form vivo, if it's only one person. But if it's I plus other people, so we, nosotros, the form is vivimos. In English is the same. I live, we live. But in Spanish, we have to change. Yo vivo, nosotros vivimos. The second person, tú vives, so you live. O vosotros, ustedes, like you all, vivís. They might seem pretty similar, but the pronunciation is different. Tú vives, vosotros vivís. And then the third person, he or she, él o ella, vive, o ellos, they, viven. ¿Listo? It might be overwhelming at first, but there are rules and there are patterns for this. So once you know the rules and the patterns, it's much easier to conjugate. Now, there are verbs that are regular. They follow patterns, but there are verbs that are irregular and they don't follow patterns. So those verbs, we have to memorize the conjugations. There are not so many irregular verbs in Spanish. Actually, only 2 verbs are completely irregular, which are ser and ir. But we use those verbs so much that we get used to the conjugations very quickly. Now, the verbal mood, this is something that many students don't learn until they are intermediate or advanced, but there are different verbal moods in Spanish. In English too. In Spanish, they are indicative, subjunctive, and imperative. The one that you learn first is indicative. And with indicative, we express facts or reality. And let's see how the verb changes as well. So this is for the person tú. In the mood, in the indicative mood, we will say tú amas. In imperative, we will say ama. And in subjunctive, ames. So here, the verb also changes according to the mood. Now you don't have to learn this, but I just want you to show you that conjugations express many different things. So all of these things together create the complex rules for how Spanish verbs change. It is really important for you to get these rules right at the beginning because they help you talk correctly in Spanish. Now, let's go to the present tense. First, when do we use the present tense? What do you think, Aileen? ¿Cuándo usamos el tiempo presente?
When talking about now or today.
Sí, muy bien. Sí. So we use the present tense. Basically 2 things. Actions happening right now, or actions that are generally true, or things that we used to do in the present. I could say, por ejemplo, yo trabajo en una oficina todos los días. So every day I work in an office. That's something that I tend to do every day. So there I can also use the present tense. Actions happening right now. Por ejemplo, estudio español. So right now, we study Spanish, we learn Spanish. Estudio español in this moment. ¿Qué haces? Like, what are you doing? In Spanish, we don't need to use the gerund or the present continuous. We can use the present tense. Like, what do you do? ¿Qué haces? ¿Qué haces? La respuesta, leo un libro. I read a book. Or in English, I am reading a book. Leo un libro. Bien. Actions that are generally true. So the present tense is not limited to describing actions happening right now. It is also used to convey actions, events, or states that are generally true, habitual, or part of someone's regular routine. Por ejemplo, trabajo en una oficina. I work in an office. Aquí, él trabaja en una oficina, so he works in an office. O los lunes voy al gimnasio. On Mondays, like every Monday, I go to the gym. Es más o menos similar en inglés también. ¿Listo? Bueno, entonces, esto es súper importante. La persona gramatical, the grammatical person. I have many students that already learned how to conjugate, but they still have problems with conjugations because they have a hard time identifying the subject in a sentence or the person who does the action. That's really, really important. If we are unable to identify the person, we cannot conjugate. It will make no sense. If the person is yo and I conjugate for él, like yo trabaja, it doesn't make sense in Spanish. So we need to identify the person and then conjugate. ¿Listo? Entonces, la persona gramatical o the grammatical person or the subject is the person who performs the action. And there are 3 different persons in Spanish: the first person, the second person, and the third person. The first person is basically the speaker. Is the person who speaks. Yo. Yo hago, yo hablo, yo trabajo, etc. Yo. Yo is singular because it's only one person. But if it was me and other people, and I am included in that group, it will be first person plural. O nosotras. Por ejemplo, mi amiga y yo hablamos español. So my friend and I speak Spanish. This mi amiga y yo will be equal to nosotros. It is my friend and I. That equals we. In Spanish, mi amiga y yo equals nosotros. So we will have to conjugate the verb hablar according to the person nosotros. Now, the second person will be the person who you talk to. I'm talking to you. You are the second person. The second person can also be singular. And here we have 2 options. Tú, which is informal, and usted, which is formal. If we have a group of people that we are talking to, like you all or you guys, that will be ustedes. Because it will be you and other people that are also listening. I'm talking to a group. The conjugations also change according to this. If we decide to use the person tú, then the conjugation is hablas. Tú hablas español. But if we use usted, the conjugation is habla. Usted habla español. Now, if we talk to a group and I say tus amigos y tú, so your friends and you, that's a group that is listening to me. They are the second person. That equals like you all in English. Tus amigos y tú hablan español. O ustedes hablan español. So, tus amigos y tú will be the same as ustedes in Latin America. ¿Listo? And then the third person is the person who we talk about. We call it person, but it can also be a situation, a thing. Like if we talk about the weather is a person that we're talking about grammatically. and it will equal in Spanish, él or he. It's not a person, like a real person, but we call it like that in grammar. So if it's a male, we say él. If it's a female, we say ella. This will be only one person. But if it's a group, we will say ellos o ellas. Por ejemplo, Juan habla español. Juan is the same as saying él. Él habla español. Y en grupo, Juan y sus hermanos hablan español. So, Juan y sus hermanos is the same as ellos. Ellos hablan español. ¿Listo? Do you have any questions? If you have questions at any time, you can just unmute yourselves. ¿Bien? Okay.
Bien.
Listo. Muy bien. So to summarize, these are the subjects. Yo, first person singular. Tú o usted. Él o ella. Nosotros, ustedes y ellos. Ok, vamos a practicar. This is an example. We'll do a quick exercise, and this one is just to show you how we are going to do. So we have the sentence, María camina en el parque con su perro. So María performs the action of walking. We talk about María, right? She's not listening to me speaking, but we are talking about her. So the subject is the same as she, ella. That's why the verb is conjugated according to she, or ella, María camina. ¿Listo? So in Spanish, we don't even need the personal pronouns because it is implied in the conjugations. I could just say, camina en el parque con su perro. We already know that camina will be for él o ella. O usted, depende. Entonces, what's the subject here? You can use the chat to answer or you can unmute yourselves. Los niños estudian para el examen de matemáticas. ¿Cuál es el sujeto?
Subject is los niños.
Muy bien. And los niños, with what pronoun would you use to replace los niños?
Ellos.
Ellos. Perfecto. Súper bien. Sí. El pronombre es ellos. El sujeto es ellos. Muy bien. Tú preparas una pizza deliciosa. ¿Cuál es el sujeto?
Tú.
Tú. Súper. ¿Sí? Es directo. Dice tú. Es muy obvio. Muy bien. Yo voy a la playa mañana.
Yo.
Yo también. Muy obvio. Muy obvio. So in this case, it's pretty obvious because it's there. But if we didn't have the pronoun and if we only had the verb, voy, we could still tell who the subject is because the conjugation is unique for that subject. ¿Listo? Bien, súper. Entonces, partes del verbo. Muy importante también. Vamos a hablar de... So we already saw this, but we need to recap. So I told you before that there are 3 main groups in Spanish. Verbs that end in ar, and ir. So all verbs in the base form, in the infinitive, will end in either ar, ir. There's no verb ending in anything else. Every verb in Spanish will end in either ar, or ir. The thing is that this ending doesn't tell us if the verb is regular or not. So we have everything here, everything. Now, before we conjugate, we also need to understand the two different parts of a verb. A verb, every verb has a stem and an ending. In the infinitive form, the ending is ar, ir. To identify the stem, what we have to do is get rid of the ending. And what's left is the stem. So the stem in hablar is habl. Aquí, habl. The stem in comer is com. And the stem in vivir is vip. This is very important. A lot of students don't do this when they conjugate. And if you don't do this, you'll probably get it wrong, or you'll do something else, or you might even conjugate a different verb. Entonces, esto es importante. Bien. Vamos a practicar. So here we have a box with different verbs. We are going to write the stem only in the right box. So, por ejemplo, we have the verb aislar. Aislar ends in ar, so I'll put it in this box, the R endings, and I'm only going to write the stem. The stem for aislar is aisl. That's very important. So in the chat, let's do dividir. What will be the stem for dividir? Perfecto. Muy bien. Divid. Muy bien. What's the stem for esconder? Bien. Listo. En el chat. Super. What's the stem in barrer? Perfecto. Sí. Bar. Muy bien. What's the stem in agregar? Bien. Listo. Y una más. What's the stem in reusar? Reusar. Listo. Super. Muy bien. Perfecto. This is very important because we are going to need those stems in order to conjugate. ¿Listo? Super. Bien. Entonces, now let's get to it. Let's conjugate. Let's start with regular verbs. They follow patterns. It's very simple once you know them, and once you already know who does the action, it's much easier to conjugate. Now, regular verbs are regular because the stem doesn't change. We use the same stem with every person. We can even copy and paste. So for the R ending verbs, we have a specific ending for the present tense. So if we see the verb hablar, we already know that the stem is habl. We know that the verb ends in ar. It's very important because if the verb ends in ar, we are going to use the vowel a in the conjugations. Except for the first person. In the first person singular, yo, we always use o. Now we just have to put everything together. So we know that the stem is habl. We add o, and then we get hablo. Yo hablo. That means I speak. Yo hablo. In tú, we add us. Tú hablas. En él, ella, usted, because they're conjugated the same way, we add a. Entonces, ella habla, él habla o usted habla. Con nosotros, we are going to add amos. And we get hablamos. Nosotros hablamos. For vosotros, we don't use this in Latin America, but it's good that you know that it exists. And also, if you have friends in Spain or if you want to travel to Spain, you will hear vosotros as well. Vosotros means you all. In Latin America, we use ustedes instead, but the conjugations are different. So for vosotros, we add ais, and there we have vosotros habláis. And for ustedes and ellos, we add an. Entonces, ustedes hablan o ellos, ellas hablan. ¿Listo? Do you have any questions here? ¿Todo bien? Should we practice?
Sure.
Bien. Let's do, so here there's a list. These verbs are regular. They're useful verbs as well. Let's do cocinar. To cook. Cocinar. You can use the chat for this. Write the conjugations in the chat, or if you want to say them out loud, that you can also do that. Let's conjugate cocinar. How do we conjugate cocinar with every subject? Remember, first thing, we know that the ending is ar, so we already know that. What's the stem? And then to that stem, you will add the endings for each person. Okay, Wendy, the stem will be for cocinar. If we get rid of the ending, which is ar, the stem will be cocin. The stem is cocin. Cocin. To that stem, we can add the endings. So, yo cocino, tú cocinas, él cocina. Sí. Eileen, súper. Bien. Wendy, ¿tienes preguntas? Do you have questions?
No, I just wanted to say thanks for the patience. I'm trying to do this on my phone because my computer is not at home today. So I will do better next time.
That's okay. Don't worry about that. Muy bien. Listo. Vamos con the second group, verbs ending in er. It's pretty much the same process. We already know that comer ends in er. So we get rid of that ending. We keep the stem, which is com. We use the stem with every person because the verb is regular. The stem doesn't change. And we are going to add endings. The endings are pretty much the same as the first group. So the only thing that is different is that we don't use the vowel a anymore, but e, because the verb ends in er. So we use e. So now we get yo como, tú comes, él come, nosotros comemos, vosotros coméis, ustedes comen, ellos comen. This will be comer is to eat. So I eat, you eat, she eats. But now you know that in Spanish we change a lot more. Listo? You'll get used to this. At first, you're like, oh, what's the subject? What's the stem? What's the ending for that subject? But you'll get used to it. You need to practice and repeat. Practice and repeat. ¿Listo? Entonces, let's try to conjugate aprender, which is to learn. How would you conjugate aprender? First, what's the stem in aprender? Sí, muy bien. The stem is aprende. Muy bien. So we use that stem with every person. And we just need to add the endings according to the person. So what's the conjugation? For yo, por ejemplo. Ok. Yo aprendo, tú aprendes, usted aprende, nosotros aprendemos, ellos aprenden. Listo. Perfecto. Súper bien. Bueno, vamos con el tercer grupo. So here we have ir endings or verbs ending in ir. They are almost the same as verbs ending in er. We actually use the vowel e, except with the person nosotros and vosotros. With these two, we do need to use the vowel e. In Spanish, this is called e. The other one is e. This one is e. This one is e en español. ¿Listo? So, same steps. We know that the ending is ir. We get rid of it. We have the stem, cubre, cubre. Cubrir means to cover. We use the stem with every one. And we just add the endings according to the person. There we have yo cubro, tú cubres, él cubre, nosotros cubrimos, vosotros cubrís, ustedes cubren y ellos cubren. ¿Listo? Vamos a practicar. Vamos con el verbo. Vamos con partir. Partir. To leave. Partir. What's the stem in partir? Par. Muy bien. Super. Now, how do we conjugate partir? Wendy, yo parto, tú partes, él parte, nosotros partimos, ellos parten. Sí, súper. Muy bien. Eileen, yo parto, tú partes, usted parte, nosotros partimos, ustedes parten, ellos parten. Listo, súper. Muy bien. Perfecto. Bien. Now, we'll use those endings even in irregular verbs. I'll show you now. Not with total irregular verbs, like completely irregular verbs, but there are some verbs that are irregular, but not that much. So that's what we're doing now. There's a group of verbs called stem changing verbs. There. They are irregular, but not really, because they still follow a pattern. It is a different pattern, but it is still a pattern. And here we just need to change one vowel in the stem. In this group, there are 4 different groups as well. So let's start with this. So these are verbs that change the vowel E in the stem for EA. Por ejemplo, the verb pensar, to think. Pensar. The stem is pens, right? If you just get rid of the ending ar, then the stem is pens. Now, because this verb changes a vowel in the stem, instead of using pens to conjugate, we are going to use piens. So we go from E to EA. Except, because there's also exceptions, except with nosotros and vosotros. Nosotros and vosotros don't change. They use the regular stem. ¿Listo? And then the endings are the same that we just learned. So pensar ends in ar. We know that we have to use those AR endings in this verb. So yo pienso, I think. Tú piensas, you think. Él, ella, usted piensa, he or she thinks. Nosotros pensamos, we think. Vosotros pensáis, you guys think. Y ellos, ellas piensan, they think. ¿Listo? I have also querer and preferir, but it's the same. It's just that pensar ends in ar, querer ends in preferir ends in ir. Now, there's one thing important, and in the verb preferir, it actually has 2 es in the stem. When you see that, we only change the second one. We don't change both of them, only the second one. So this first e stays the same. Here the new stem is prefier. So yo prefiero, tú prefieres, él prefiere, nosotros preferimos, vosotros preferís y ellos prefieren. ¿Listo? Do you have any questions here? Todo bien. Bueno, vamos a practicar. Let's practice then with one of them. Let's do cerrar. Cerrar means to close. Cerrar. And I'll show you this again. How would you conjugate cerrar? Ok. Yo cierro, tú cierras, usted cierra, nosotros cerramos, ellos cierran. ¿Listo? Perfecto. Muy bien. Okay. So the second group here, it's kind of similar, but instead of changing E for IE, we just change it for E. So E for E. Here we have repetir, pedir, medir. So the stem in repetir is repet, but because we have to change the vowel, the new stem is repeat, repeat. We'll use this stem with everyone except nosotros and vosotros. We don't change in nosotros and vosotros. It stays the same. Repetir means to repeat. Repetir. ¿Listo? Entonces, vamos a practicar con vestir. Let's do vestir. How do you conjugate vestir? Vestir. Yo visto, tú vistes, él viste, nosotros vestimos, ustedes visten. Listo. Súper. Muy bien. Bueno, vamos con el siguiente grupo. So this is the third group. Here we have verbs that change O for UE. Now, I forgot to tell you this, that these verbs that change, there's not a way to say, when you see the infinitive, there's not a way to say if they're irregular or regular, or if we have to change something. There's no way to tell. The only way is memorizing the verbs. So that's why I have a list for each group. There's a list. And you have to memorize them. There's no other way to know if they have to change or not. ¿Listo? So now, these verbs change the O for UE. Por ejemplo, volver. The stem is volv, but because we have to change the O for UE, the new stem is vuelv. Vuelv. Now we know that the ending is er, so we'll use those ER endings in these conjugations. So, yo vuelvo, tú vuelves, usted vuelve, nosotros volvemos, vosotros volvéis, y ustedes vuelven. Remember that we don't have to change with nosotros and vosotros. ¿Listo? Now, let's practice with dormir. Dormir, dormir. Dormir. Dormir means to sleep. How do we conjugate dormir? Yo duermo, tú duermes, usted duerme, nosotros dormimos, ustedes duermen. Listo. Perfecto. Muy bien. Bueno. Now the last group, I have good news here. There's only one verb in this group, and the verb is jugar, to play, like to play games, to play sports. Jugar. In this verb, we change the U for UE. So instead of using jug with everyone, we use juegue, except with nosotros and vosotros. So here we get yo juego, tú juegas, usted juega, nosotros jugamos, vosotros jugáis y ustedes juegan. And this is the only verb in this group. ¿Listo? Bien? Okay. Any questions so far?
No, not yet.
Okay. Listo. Muy bien. Bueno, entonces, remember that for this type of verbs, we are only going to change one vowel in the stem. The endings are the same that we learned before with regular verbs. Okay, so now there are irregular verbs in Spanish that are only irregular in the first person singular. So with the person yo. Only change with the person yo. Now these three verbs change in the first person, but they also change a vowel. So actually, if we see the verb tener, it is irregular in the first person. We say yo tengo. We don't say yo tengo or yo tieno. We don't say that. We say yo tengo. And then the other subjects, they also change a vowel. So this verb tener, it's actually mixed. It's irregular in two ways, in two different ways. Same with venir and oír. Venir, we say yo vengo, so I come, yo vengo. Y oír, yo oigo, I hear, yo oigo. ¿Listo? The other verbs that I have here, they are only different with the person yo. Salir, yo salgo. But then the rest, it's just as a regular verb. Tú sales, él sale, salimos, etc. Same with traer. Yo traigo y valer. Yo valgo. Only different with yo. Same here. Poner, yo pongo. Caer, yo caigo. Y caber, yo quepo. So these verbs, you also have to memorize that they are different in the person with the person yo. But the rest is regular. Let's look at caber. Caber is really strange because we go from caber to quepo. And then the other people, we just go with the regular form. Tú cabes, él cabe, cabemos, etc. So only the first person is irregular. Little kids, they're not used to the irregular form and they say yo cabo. But it's not correct. They learned as they grow. Well, we learn as we grow as well. ¿Listo? And then ver y dar. So ver, we say yo veo. If we see the stem in ver, the stem is just the letter V. Just that consonant. That's the stem of the verb. So we actually use the stem, the V, with everyone except the first person. Veo, yo veo. And the same here with dar. The stem in this verb is just the letter D, but we don't say yo do. We say yo doy, yo doy. And then we just follow the regular conjugation with everyone else. Listo. Muy bien. So that was the workshop for today. I don't know if you have any questions about the conjugations. If you do, this is the time to ask. I know it's a lot of information. You'll probably get questions later when you're trying to conjugate and when you need to conjugate, but it's good that we know the rules, what the stem is, how to identify the subject, etc. Bueno, so I know that if you're here is because you want to improve your Spanish and your speaking skills. So one way to do that is actually speaking. This workshop is for basic students, beginner students, and sometimes we think that beginners don't have the ability to speak yet, but actually it's very important that you try and that you speak. That's why I have a conversation group that is designed for basic or beginners. Actually, Aileen is one of my students in the conversation club. And let me show you how it looks. So it's very important for in every stage of your learning process, it's very important to expose yourself and try to speak. I know that when you're just starting to learn, you're in a point in which you say, I understand, but it's harder to talk, like to speak. Like I know what they're telling me, but I don't know how to answer. That's normal. And the only way to overcome that is by trying. And you don't have to be perfect, but you have to try. So in conversation sessions, you can learn idiomatic expressions, phrases, cultural insights. You also get your ear used to the Spanish sounds and pronunciation. So it's very important that you can have that practice with someone who speaks Spanish. Now, there are two different groups. Beginners group, which is for A1 or A2 levels. That means beginners. And there's also an intermediate advanced group. Two different groups. So this is what we talk about. This is the agenda actually for the rest of the year. Every week we meet either on Mondays or Tuesdays. It's the same topic per week. And we talk about anything, actually. In the basic group, the vocabulary is more simple, it's easier. We talk a lot about in the present tense. Maybe we can practice a little bit of conditional or very basic forms. And we also learn vocabulary. We find ways to express what we want to say, etc. This is an example of what we do in a basic group. We play, we ask questions, etc. This is what we did yesterday. We practiced the verb gustar, which works different as the verbs that we did today. And we meet on Mondays and Tuesdays. You'll get this information in your email as well. And if you're more advanced, then this is the agenda for the intermediate advanced students. Today we were talking about haunted destinations. It was very, very interesting. And the constructions here and the structures for speaking is more complex according to the level. It's very, very interesting. So here we find more like open questions like, what do you think about this? In the basic group, we focus more on short answers and more direct questions. And for the intermediate advanced group, we meet on Wednesdays and Thursdays. So maximum 6 people in a group and one monitor, like it could be me or someone from my team. And very important, because practice makes perfect. It's also very important to try and learn and practice as much as you can. The best way to learn is being in a Spanish-speaking country, but not everyone has that chance. So try at least learn one word every day, try to talk to someone in Spanish, read in Spanish, listen to music, podcast, etc. But if you can have that direct practice with someone who speaks Spanish, that's really good. Improve your vocabulary as well, gain confidence. At first, I know it's scary to speak. We're scared to make mistakes, but if you don't do, then you don't learn. And improve your pronunciation. Yeah. So if you want to start, I'm gonna send you an email with this. There's a coupon. It will give you a 20% off in a package. You can get a package of 6 lessons. And if you enter this coupon, you can save $13. Listo. And here are some comments from my students. So if you have any questions, let me know. You'll get an email tomorrow with the recording from today, and also an option to download the PDF and the links to the conversation clubs. If you're interested in joining, that will be really good. I will be very happy to help you. Wendy, so there are packages of 6. If you would like to commit for a longer period, we could discuss that. We could arrange that as well. You don't have to pay monthly. You pay 6 lessons in a package, and you have 2 months to book. Like, you don't have to book every week, but you can book, let's say, 3 weeks, then take a break, and then 3 more weeks as well. Listo. Bueno, any other question? Eileen, do you have anything to say about the conversation sessions?
Other than it's very, very helpful, because my biggest thing is I don't have anyone at home to practice speaking. And so it helps get over that shyness, and also helps me learn new words, especially if I'm not certain of how to express like what I did yesterday or over the weekend.
Yeah, sometimes even just listening to the group, if you're too afraid to speak, but you have that practice by joining the session and just like being exposed to that conversation or to that vocabulary or to that grammar review, that also helps. And in a moment, because that's happened to me as well, English is not my first language. I had to learn it, and I also learned German and Italian, and I was so afraid at first to speak because I was afraid to make mistakes. And then I was like, well, if I don't speak, then I'm not going to learn. And it took me 1 year of German lessons to start speaking. I was in that stage in which I could understand what people say, but I didn't know how to express myself until I just tried. And people were like, oh, you speak really well with mistakes, but we still understand what you want to say. So if you don't practice, you'll get stuck. You won't improve if you don't speak, or if you're not exposed to the language. Listo. Any other questions?
Nope.
Okay, so the link for the conversation club is in the chat if you want to check it out. Otherwise, you will get an email with this information tomorrow, but you can also contact me. You can write me to my email. There's also a WhatsApp group. Actually, let me send you the name. Let me see if I can grab it here. The WhatsApp group, it's not an open group. Like, not everyone can write. Only me. And I sent tips every day. Tips and events, etc. Let me see if I can find it here. ¿Dónde está? I don't have the link. Seems like I cannot share the link here. No, only from my phone. I have it. Okay. So if you click the link, you'll be in the WhatsApp group as well. I share tips, vocabulary, one thing every day.
Someone was detected at your front.
Listo. Bueno, chicos, if you don't have any more questions, so that's all. Thank you so much for joining. Tomorrow you'll get the recording if you're interested in reviewing anything, and also an option to download the PDF. ¿Listo? Muy bien.
Gracias.
Thank you so much. Muchas gracias. I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Chao.
Adios. Gracias.
Adiós.